Hi, I'm Jonathan Fisher, a clinical cardiologist and a mindfulness meditation teacher, and today I wanted to talk about resilience. What is it? What gets in the way? And how can we strengthen our resilience to make it through these challenging times? Let's start by talking about what resilience is. Resilience, above all, is a mindset. It's a state of mind. It's a belief in ourselves that no matter what the challenge, we'll make it through. It's important to remember that resilience does not just mean, well, I'll deal with stress and I'll survive. It's actually growth after stress. Can I come out even stronger than I was before after whatever physical or psychological stress I face? Also called post-traumatic growth. There are a number of things that get in the way of our resilience. Most of all, it's a negative self-belief. It's a lack of trust in ourselves. We may have so much fear about the future, or we may have failed in the past, that we start to believe we can't survive. We learn to be hopeless and to feel helpless. Why do we even talk about resilience? We talk about it because there's stress in our lives. If there weren't any stress, we wouldn't need resilience. So let's talk for a minute about what stress is. Most of us, when we talk about stress, are really talking about emotional distress. It's a feeling that we can't cope with whatever's going on, that we don't have the internal resources and external resources to survive and to thrive. It really is a belief about our ability to survive during stress. But what happens with the stress response? Well, first there's some trigger, there's a stimulus. Either something's happening on the outside, like this pandemic going on, or there's something happening on the inside, either a sensation of discomfort or a memory about something difficult in the past that rings the alarm bell of our brain, that amygdala in the ancient part of our brain that helps keep us safe. Challenge is that our brain goes into overdrive and it prepares us for fight, flight, or freeze, playing dead if there's some scary obstacle or challenge that's coming. So what we're trying to do in developing resilience is to calm down that fear response, that amygdala response, and to shift our attention, our mental activity, towards what's called the prefrontal cortex, the part of our brain that's responsible for planning, executive function. The real challenge with stress is that we weren't meant to live with chronic stress every day and chronic anxiety. We were meant to have sudden stress or challenge, to face it, to overcome it, and then to rest and recover. Chronic stress has been linked with chronic muscular pain, fibromyalgia, high blood pressure, cardiovascular disease, anxiety, depression, suicide, alcoholism, and other addictive behaviors, and the list goes on and on. If we really want to help protect our bodies and our minds, we need to learn to work with stress in a skillful way, and then we can develop real resilience. Once the alarm bell of the brain goes off, there are two pathways that signal the mind to get the body ready for stress. One of them is from the hypothalamus in the brain, which stimulates the release of cortisol, which then goes on and can cause inflammation in the body. There's also an activation of the autonomic nervous system, and specifically the branch called the sympathetic nervous system, which increases our heart rate, raises our blood pressure, starts to make us sweat a little bit, and can release stomach acid. There's a whole sequence of events, and these two pathways can rev the body up, and if left unchecked over time, can lead to a number of medical diseases. There are some factors from our past that we can't control that affect how resilient we are. There are some genetic factors, some traits of our personality. We may have grown up in households with parents who weren't in touch with what our needs were, or they may have been so focused on themselves that we didn't feel like our needs were important, and we never really learned how to deal with stress in a healthy way or to express our emotions. The early research on resilience came from Emmy Warner, who studied children in Hawaii and asked the question, why is it that children whose parents are either abusive or alcoholic, why is it that among those, up to 1/3 grow up to be very functional and to have successful, happy lives? And she searched for the resilience trait. And there are three parts to the resilience trait. The first part of being resilient is having a mindset, an attitude that we can control our thoughts, our reactions to the world outside of us, and we have what's called an internal locus of control, or as the ancient Stoic Greek philosophers said, there is a dichotomy of control. Some people believe that the outside world determines our fate, and others believe that we get to choose how we think and act in any moment. So that's the first core piece of resilience. The second piece is the attitude we have about challenge itself. Do we believe that challenge will knock us over? Or do we have what's called by Carol Dweck a growth mindset? The attitude that no matter what happens, we can calm our nervous system, we can think clearly, and we can find a way forward so that we'll grow and even thrive in the face of many challenges. The third aspect of a resilient personality is a connection with our own deepest sense of purpose, something that's unshakable, so that we always have a true north that can guide us forward despite the stress, and a connection with others, a sense that we are dependent on others, others are dependent on us, and we belong. And those are really the three pieces of resilience. That number one, internal locus of control. Number two, a growth mindset that we can make it through, a belief in ourselves. And the third is a connection with what's most unshakable in ourselves, our core values and our purpose, and a connection with others. So what do you think? What helps you be resilient when you're facing stress or challenges? Share in the comments below. There's one caveat that's extremely important when we talk about resilience. There are many companies and organizations today that have programs for their employees that say, we're going to help you be more resilient. I want to place a warning that we are not trying to help people be more resilient so that we can put more stress upon them, so that we can make people work harder, so that they can feel more overwhelmed. That's not the point here. The point is we want to strengthen people's internal resilience, and we also want to look at what external forces we are placing upon them. Can we create environments at work that are more human, that are more kind and more compassionate, so that we are not pushing people to their breaking point? What are some of the benefits of resilience? The basic benefit is that resilient people tend to have a more positive mindset and have a more positive experience each day. The emotions they experience, there's more joy, there's more optimism, there's more gratitude towards life, and there's less anxiety and depression and hopelessness. So there's a strong psychological benefit for our well-being when we develop resilience. I like to think about resilience as three phases. First, we need to have prevention. So we need to do things that keep our mind and our body strong so that when stress happens, we can bounce back. The second is, in the middle of the great stress, what techniques do we have to cope? And then the third is, once we've kind of leveled things off, how can we actively thrive and grow and become stronger and keep a positive mindset and develop those resources that will keep us flourishing in the future? When it comes to prevention or readying ourselves for stress, it's really about how can we nurture and nourish ourselves to keep our bodies strong. The obvious things like plenty of sleep, rest during the day, hydration, proper nutrition, and also cultivating strong relationships so that we don't wait until the last minute and we find that we haven't developed those relationships that we really need when times get tough. It's helpful when thinking about resilience to think of some role models, some famous people or people in your life. It may have been a parent or a spouse or a friend, someone who's gone through great challenge, great difficulty, and somehow managed to not only survive, but to come out stronger and maybe even lead others through their own challenges. You can think of people like Martin Luther King or Mahatma Gandhi or even Stephen Hawking, people who've had great challenge and loss to their physical well-being or even psychological well-being and found a way to make it through. Let's talk for a minute about how to be resilient. What are the practices we can develop each day to help us make it through challenging times? Most importantly, self-mastery. If we work on developing our own ability to regulate our thoughts, to deal with difficult emotions, and to develop behaviors that help move from fear and towards connection with others, that's really the core message here. Part of that is having a mindset towards growth. Rather than believing that we are going to fail and we're going to struggle, At our core, can we remind ourselves that we will survive and we will grow from the experience? How do we develop this self-mastery? Starts with practices like mindfulness. Mindfulness is simply being aware of the present moment and what's happening inside and outside without judging it, so that we take a more calm, neutral view of challenging situations, and we can watch, almost like an observer, our own thoughts, rather than getting carried away with them. That's self-mastery. There's another important piece of the puzzle for resilience, and that's having a positive mindset or attitude. This doesn't come naturally for a lot of us. Some of us are more anxious or more nervous or even neurotic. It is possible, we now know, to shift some of those personality traits, to calm anxiety and to develop optimism and hope. One of the powerful ways to develop optimism, or realistic optimism, is to learn to challenge our thoughts, to know that we are not our thoughts. We don't have to believe something just because it pops into our head. I could believe something scary about the future. I also can decide to not believe that thought, to just say, is that realistic? Or is there a more realistic thought or belief that I can replace it with? I can also develop positive attitudes like gratitude. Every morning I can wake up and think of 1 or 2 or even 3 things and write them down that I'm grateful for, or people that I'm grateful for. I can also develop a sense of hope for the future. I can also use humor and try to laugh and smile whenever possible, even in the midst of adversity, because we know that the hormones that are released when we smile are so powerful at calming the stress response. What else can we do? It's very important to know that taking action is part of being resilient. It doesn't mean taking some kind of reflexive automatic action, running away or fighting. It means taking thoughtful action, and action that's specifically aligned with what our core beliefs and values are. Our core beliefs are what get us through challenging times. We have to decide, what are our core beliefs? Do we believe in the value of courage? Do we believe in wisdom? Do we believe in a sense of balance? Is compassion important to us? Is wisdom important to us? It's useful to list all the possible values you can think of that you believe in and narrow it down to 5 or 3 or even 1 core value. And that will help with resilience. What else can help with resilience? Connection, more than anything else. Resilience is about feeling connected, to have people on the outside help us, but also to help ourselves, to have self-compassion and a belief in ourselves that we'll make it through any challenge. And that's something we can practice. And then there's one more factor that really has shown to help people through resilience, and that's the ability to find one thing, an activity, to really focus on and get lost in. It's called getting lost in flow. One more factor that really helps with resilience is the ability to find an activity that we can totally immerse ourselves in, so that time stands still and we don't have mental chatter criticizing or judging or anticipating the future. You may love to play violin, you may like to do sports or walk outside, or even just have a good conversation with someone, or read a book, or knit, or cook. There are so many things, and what's right for you is what's right for you. So finding that moment of what's called flow and engaging in it helps reduce the stress response and remind us that there is joy even in the midst of challenge. There's another key piece to resilience, and we touched on it when we talked about self-mastery and having a positive mindset, and that is self-trust. Do we believe in our own ability to make it through challenges? And some of us may struggle with self-trust, and it's a process of learning to believe in yourself and your own inner resources. One way to do that is to pause and to think of a time in your life when you faced a great challenge, and somehow, even though you might not have thought you were going to, you made it through. And thinking, well, what helped me get through that? Were there internal resources? Were there people on the outside? And just for a moment, savoring the fact that you were able to make it through that. What about you? Can you remember a challenge that you faced in your life that you were able to make it through? How did you do it? Share that in the comments below. Let's summarize. We talked about resilience not being something that we're born with, but being something that we can develop over time. It's really a process, and we can study how to be resilient. We can think of role models. We can think of famous people who are resilient, and in a sense, we can take on some of their virtues and do some of the things that they did. We also can develop a belief in ourselves, in what's called the internal locus of control, that we do have some ability to shape our own lives. We also talked about the importance of having a growth mindset, in welcoming challenges because they're an opportunity to learn and to grow. And we talked about the importance of connection with what's most true in our own hearts, and connection with other people and communities of belonging who can support us when we need them the most. We also talked about a number of strategies to help us become more resilient, working on our own self-mastery, our ability to cope, trying to develop or cultivate positive states of mind like gratitude, optimism, love. We talked about acting and aligning our behaviors with our core beliefs. We talked about the importance of connection. And then lastly, we talked about the value of finding activities engaging in flow, where we're totally immersed in the activity. I'd love to learn from you. What other thoughts do you have about resilience? What else would you like to hear from me? Any other topics that you'd love to hear about? I'm happy to discuss anything related to happiness, resilience, well-being, managing stress, mindfulness, compassion. I'm happy that you're here with me. I'm glad you joined me today. And if you found value in this video, I'd love it if you clicked the subscribe below so you can hear next week's video and share it with your friends. Thanks. Be kind to yourself and to each other.